In fact, the Honorable Senior Lawyer need not have any introduction at all. Almost everybody knows him. But I am specifically mentioning this fact. Just few days back, I had got an opportunity to give a lecture in the Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa series, BLEP. This series is for the young upcoming lawyers who will be joining our bar. And after I delivered the lecture, Nimbalkar sir on his own specifically messaged me that I had given a good lecture and he encouraged me. This is how he is encouraging, always encouraging the junior lawyers and helping the lawyers. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to kindly start with today's lecture. Over to you, sir, Nimbalkar sir.
Thank you. My esteemed colleague in the Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa, Advocate Sangram Desai, the President of Ratnagiri Bar Association, Sindhudurg Bar Association, the committee members, and all respected advocates, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to be with you this evening for this lecture. It is thanks to my colleague Sangram that I am standing before you today. The topic, as you all know, is criminal trial and the defenses that can be taken in a criminal trial. Many of you must have conducted session trials and criminal trials in various courts. And I firmly believe that I am not a teacher and you are not students. All of us are students of law. Our practice, the profession is a learning process. We learn every day. We learn from every case. The great Ram Jethmalani used to say that nobody is perfect and all of us are students of law. And therefore, I also firmly believe the same thing. Nevertheless, I am having some experience and I will share my experience with you in respect of criminal cases and criminal trial. Now, as you all know, that there are two types of criminal cases. One instituted upon a police report and the other instituted otherwise than on a police report. Now, the cases which are instituted otherwise than on police report, in normal parlance, we call them as private cases. The procedure laid down for private cases is different than the process laid down in a police case that is instituted upon a police report. We will not be dealing with the private cases today. We would only be dealing with the cases instituted upon a police report, that is police cases. Now, as you all know, anybody can set criminal law into motion. If a person is having knowledge about an incident of a cognizable case, or if a person has actually seen the incident happening, if he is an eyewitness or is having knowledge, he can go to the police station and lodge a complaint in respect of the incident that he has seen or in respect of the incident in respect of which he is having knowledge. Now, when such a person goes to the police station, it is the duty of the officer in charge of the police station to
Hello, sir, your voice has gone.
Achha, voice has gone. Now we can hear?
Sir, one more request. I would like to make a request to everybody. Please put off your videos. तुम्ही जो व्हिडिओचं जे लाल बटन आहे ते प्लीज बंद करा. तुमचे व्हिडिओ चालू राहिले की स्पीड कमी होतो. I request everybody to please put off their videos. तुमचे व्हिडिओज बंद करा. Sir, please go ahead. Now I can hear you. Sir, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, if a person is having knowledge about the incident or he has seen an incident of a cognizable nature, he can go to the police station and inform about it. When he informs about the incident to the police, it is a duty of the officer in charge of the police station or any person who is appointed by the officer in charge of the police station to take it down in writing, and after it is reduced into writing,
Hello.
Hello, sir. I can't hear you, sir.
I know. There is some problem, network problem. Let me talk to him.
Okay, sir.
आणि तुम्ही सगळ्यांनी पहिलं अगोदर व्हिडिओज ऑफ करा. बरेच जणांचे व्हिडिओ चालू आहेत त्याच्यामुळे.
सर केलेत सर केलेत.
कुलदीप मंडले प्लीज व्हिडिओ ऑफ करा. तुम्ही व्हिडिओ ऑफ करा.
hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I was on the point that anybody can set the criminal law into motion. He or she who is having knowledge about the incident or has seen an incident can go to the police station and inform about it to the police. The police, it is a duty of the officer in charge of the police station to record it. Hello.
Sir, we can hear you, sir.
Hello.
Sir, we can hear you. Sir, please carry on.
We can hear you, sir. आम्हाला ऐकू येते.
To record
Sir, ऐकू येते आम्हाला.
in the police station, and the copy has to be immediately given to the first informant, and the substance of the information has to be reduced into writing in a book specially maintained in the police station. Now, the information can be an oral information or in writing. A complainant can also bring a complaint in writing, or when it is given orally, then it is the duty of the officer to reduce it into writing. That we call as the first information report. Now, on the basis of this first information report, the police officer starts the investigation. Now, what kind of investigation the police does? If after the FIR, the first and foremost is that he goes to the spot of the incident, the place where the incident has occurred, ascertain for himself that such an incident has occurred, and he records the scene of offense Panchanama, which we call as the spot Panchanama. Now there he actually he has to bring two independent persons who act as panchas, and in their presence the spot Panchanama has to be drawn. All the things which are there at the spot, they have to be mentioned in the spot Panchanama, and if there are any incriminating articles like blood stains, or sometimes there are blood stained stones, sometimes there is the piece of cloth is there which is having stains, slippers or chappals are there, sometimes some weapons are there, so on and so forth. So these incriminating articles are seized by the investigating officer, and that has to be mentioned in the Panchanama. Now after this spot Panchanama or the scene of offense Panchanama is drawn, thereafter, if it is a case of murder, then the inquest Panchanama of the dead body has to be drawn by the police officer. All the injuries on the person of the dead body have to be mentioned in that inquest Panchanama. That is also to be done in the presence of two independent persons as panchas, and therefore these Panchanamas have to be drawn. Then the investigating officer tries to see whether there are any witnesses who have seen the incident. If there are witnesses, their statements under section 161 have to be recorded. So statements of eyewitnesses have to be recorded, statements of other relevant witnesses has to be recorded, like if there is a witness of last seen together, or there is a witness on the point of motive, or there are some witnesses who know some part of the transaction, which was there between the accused and the disease. All these relevant witnesses, their statements have to be recorded under section 161. The panchanamas have to be drawn. If it is a case of death or murder, then the postmortem notes have to be collected by the investigating officer from the medical officer. If it is a case of under 307, 325, 326, etc., then the injury certificates are to be procured by the investigating officer, and all the relevant, then the accused has to be arrested. That is also very important. After the accused are arrested, then during their police custody, the accused may make a disclosure statement before the police that he or she is willing to disclose the place where the clothes worn at the time of the incident or the weapons used at the time of the incident are kept concealed by the accused. Then that memorandum panchanama has to be drawn. The accused takes the panchas and the police to the place where he has concealed the weapons or the articles or the clothes. That panchanama has to be drawn. After all this relevant investigation has been done by the investigating officer, then he also has to send the incriminating articles to the chemical analyzer. If the articles are stained with blood, then the chemical analyzer's report is of paramount importance, because the blood groups, etc., are determined by the chemical analyzer, and these chemical analyzer's notes are to be collected by the investigating officer. And after the entire investigation is over, then the charge sheet is filed in the court of the concerned magistrate who is having jurisdiction over that area. And therefore, this is the manner in which the investigation is done by the investigating officer on the basis of the first information report. Now, this charge sheet is the most relevant document so far as the advocate conducting trial, may it be a public prosecutor, may it be the defense advocate, is concerned. Now, after such a charge sheet is filed in the court of the magistrate, if the case is triable by the court of magistrate, like an offense under 326, 325, 324, cheating, forgery, etc., if it is triable by the court of the magistrate frames charge against the accused and proceeds with the trial. However, if it is a case which is triable by the court of sessions, then it is the duty of the magistrate to send it to the sessions court, which we call as the committal proceeding. The case is committed to the court of sessions, and after it is committed to the court of sessions, then the sessions judge frames charge against the accused. At that time, the accused is asked whether he is ready to plead guilty or not. More often than not, and most of the times, the accused pleads not guilty, and thereafter the trial against the accused proceeds. Now, it is for the prosecution to has to examine the eyewitness. For the defense counsel cross-examines. Hello. Internet connection. Hello. Yeah, I can.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So it is the public prosecutor who is in charge of the case. He conducts the examination in chief of the witnesses, and these witnesses are cross-examined by the defense counsel. There may be eyewitnesses, there may be witnesses on the point of motive, maybe witnesses on the point of last seen together, the punch witnesses who have acted as punch in the various panchanamas, etc. The doctor who has conducted post-mortem, or the doctor who has seen the injured and given the injury certificates. All these have to be examined. In the end, the investigating officer is examined, and after the prosecution examines all the witnesses, thereafter the statement of the accused is taken under section 313 of the Criminal Procedure Code. The judge himself puts all the incriminating questions to the accused, and the accused have to answer them. And in the end, accused also gives an explanation in respect of the case which is put up against him by the prosecution. If the accused wants to examine any witness in his defense, then he may give the names of the said witnesses, and the defense witnesses are thereafter examined by the defense counsel who are available to the prosecution for cross-examination, and thereafter the arguments of both the sides is recorded, and the judge thereafter, after hearing both the sides, delivers the judgment. And that, as all of you know, is the procedure in a criminal trial or a sessions trial. Now, when a client comes to you with his case, then what do you have to do? Now, first and foremost is that you collect the charge sheet from him, because the entire case is there in the charge sheet that has been filed against the accused. After you take the charge sheet in your possession, my advice to you is that you should read the charge sheet thoroughly, not once, twice, but at least thrice. More the number of times you read the charge sheet, the more you come to know about the niceties of the case. Because you may not be seeing all the evidence in the proper perspective after just one or two. For more number of times you read, you become master of facts. Remember, a trial advocate should always be master of the facts. Until you master the facts, you would not be able to do proper justice to the case. And if the facts are at the back of your mind, then when you actually cross-examine the witnesses or when you actually argue the case, it becomes very easy for you, because everything is there in your mind, because you have read the charge sheet number of times. Not only that, but what I do is, after reading the charge sheet, I prepare the notes, and a table I prepare. I ask my junior to prepare a table. In that table always is handy to you when you conduct the cross-examination. In that table, you can write names of the accused, names of the date of the arrest of the accused, the name of the disease, name of the complainant, then date and time of the offense. If there are eyewitnesses, names of the eyewitnesses, what do they tell in respect of which accused, and if there are panchas, then there are the panchanamas, for which panchanama is a pancha, etc. What are the incriminating articles that are seized during the panchanama, the blood group which is found in the report of the chemical analyzer. All these notes you should prepare. And after preparing these notes, what is important is that you should take proper instructions from the client. According to me, this taking instructions is very important. So first and foremost, you should be totally well versed with the charge sheet and the facts of the case. Once you know the facts of the case, then you should take the instructions from the client. Remember, many a times the client does not give you proper instructions or does not tell you the truth. Sometimes he does not tell the entire truth, tells the half of the truth. There are different mentalities of the accused persons. And some accused feel that if he tells all the truth to the advocate, then that the judge may come to know about it. Or some feel that the advocate may doubt the advocate's integrity also. And therefore, all the accused do not tell you the truth. But knowing the real facts is very important, because unless and until you know the truth, unless and until you know real fact, you would not be in a position to take proper defense, or you would not be able to build the case during cross-examination, which is essential. And therefore, what is important is you have to dig out the truth from the accused. Many a times, you have to cross-examine the accused and know the entire truth from him. What I do is, I normally ask them, sometimes accused are in jail, so you don't get to meet them often also unless they are brought before the court. But what I do is I ask the accused to write down everything on a piece of paper, write all the details, the exact incident that has occurred, and whatever is there in his knowledge in respect of the incident, or in respect of the motive, or in respect of any earlier incident that might have occurred between the parties. So if we get it in writing from the accused, then we can go through the entire instructions and again make queries or question the accused on some important aspects or some important points. Remember, you should take all instructions. Sometimes while taking instructions, you feel that this is very trivial and it is not important. But believe me, that sometimes this insignificant point which you feel while taking instructions also can turn the case topsy-turvy. It is my experience that sometimes I've thought that they are very insignificant details given by the accused. But while cross-examining, that insignificant point, which is true, may come to your rescue because the witness knows about it, because there is truth in it, and therefore he may give admission and open up the case, and then you may get many more admissions later on. Because while cross-examination, somehow you have to pierce through. Once you get a crucial admission, then you can go on getting admissions. That is, of course, your skill, and that skill you develop through experience. Cross-examination is a skill, and that is developed through experience. So remember, friends, you should take all the instructions in detail in order to strike out a probable defense. After you take all these instructions, now there is a chart sheet. You have taken down all the points, table is there, all material points are there, all instructions are there before you, and then on the basis of the instructions and the chart sheet, that is the prosecution case, on this basis you have to take a proper defense. Taking a proper defense is the most important thing in a criminal trial. Until and unless you take a defense, you would not be able to develop the case properly in cross-examination. Remember, defenses are normally available in the prosecution case itself. Don't go far away from the prosecution case. The prosecution courts are normally inclined to believe the defense that is in line with the prosecution story. Then some strange or new or tangent defense, which is sometimes taken by some advocates. Because court is also aware about the charge sheet, court is aware about the police statements, court is aware about the allegations which are made by the prosecution witnesses against the accused. And therefore, if your defense is in line with the prosecution case, then it becomes easier. So remember that always try to take defense in line with the prosecution case, and defense is always available in the prosecution case itself. Now, you have to analyze your strong points and weak points. You should know what your strong points are and what your weak points are before you actually cross-examine the witness. Because if there are strong points, then you have to develop those strong points. If there are weak points, you have to overcome those weak points. And that you can do through cross-examination itself.
अभी जो सुविधा दे रहा है ना, जिनका
Hello? Yeah. Yeah. So this is so now we have come to the point where we have to take a proper defense and conduct the cross-examination of the witnesses. Remember, whatever defense you take, unless and until you cross-examine the witnesses properly, you may not succeed. See, I will come to the point of cross-examination later on, but now let us see what are the different defenses that are available in a criminal trial. As I told you, that it is for the prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. And there is no burden on the accused to prove his innocence. That is the cardinal principle so far as the criminal law is concerned. An accused can remain silent, so also the accused is entitled to the benefit of doubt. Now, normally, therefore, the defense that is taken is that of total denial. That is the normal defense that is taken. Total denial means the accused says that he is not responsible for the offense. He is not concerned with the offense. If there are eyewitnesses to the incident, there are two types of cases. One, where there is direct evidence available. Direct evidence means evidence of eyewitnesses who have actually seen the incident. And cases which rest on circumstantial evidence, where the evidence available is in the form of circumstances. There is no eyewitness, but there is evidence of motive against the accused. There is evidence of last seen together. There is evidence of various panchanamas. There is discovery of weapon at the instance of the accused under Section 27 of the Evidence Act. Discovery of clothes from the accused under Section 27, or recovery of clothes from the person of the accused when they were arrested, so on and so forth. There are a number of circumstances on the record. So there are two types of cases: direct cases and cases resting on circumstantial evidence. Now, therefore, if the case is resting on eyewitnesses, then the defense normally taken is that he or she is not an eyewitness to the incident. The witnesses have not seen the incident. They were not at the place of the incident, and they were somewhere else. They have been got up by the prosecution. So they are got up witnesses. Or sometimes if they are already inimical to the accused, then because they are inimical, they have been shown as eyewitnesses. And that is why they are coming before the court and testifying against the accused. So that is the defense of total denial. But many times the case against the accused is of circumstantial nature. In fact, we will find that in most of the heinous crimes, the evidence that is obtainable is only circumstantial in nature. There is no direct evidence. Take my Jakkal Sutar case, that is Joshi Abhyankar case, Manjushri Sarda case, Naina Puchari rape and murder case, even for that matter, Nirbhaya case, so many cases. There are no eyewitnesses to the incident. And the evidence that is obtainable is circumstantial in nature. As I've already told you, evidence of motive, last seen together, extrajudicial confession made by the accused to some witness, or a judicial confession recorded under 164, or the evidence of dying declaration recorded under Section 32 of the Indian Evidence Act, and panchanamas recorded under Section 27, discovery and recovery panchanamas, so on and so forth. So these cases are heinous, but there is evidence is only circumstantial in nature. In these cases, the best available defense is the first, that is defense of total denial. because there is no eyewitness. So you need not tell that you not take a defense that you were present at the spot, because all the evidence is circumstantial in nature, and therefore the best evidence is total denial. You have to deny that there was any motive against you. You have to deny that you were seen by the witness along with the disease last in point of time. You have to deny that you have made a memorandum statement to the police, and in pursuance to the memorandum statement, you have taken the police and punched to the place where you have hidden the articles or you have hidden the clothes. You have to deny that at the time of arrest, there were bloodstained clothes on your person. And you can always say that that has been prepared later on by the police. Fabricated evidence has been created against you. You have to deny that you have given an extrajudicial confession to some witness. You have to deny that the magistrate has recorded your judicial confession and that it is true and voluntary. You have to deny all these things. Therefore, the best available defense in a trial which rests on circumstantial evidence is total denial. So also in most of the cases, even where there is direct evidence, we deny that the witnesses have seen the incident. We cross-examine the witnesses on various points on the conduct of the witness. That is, conduct before the incident, at the time of the incident, after the incident is not natural, that he has come later on after the incident is over, or that because of his enemy he has been planted as an eyewitness, so on and so forth. And of course, you have to take help of various other circumstances on record. Unless and until there are circumstances on record, you cannot take a proper defense. And you have to take the defense according to the circumstances in each particular case. In that particular case, what are the circumstances? That you have to analyze. You have to think, you have to strategize, and then you have to cross-examine in line with your defense. Now, as I told you, that cross-examination is very important. In fact, cross-examination is the most powerful weapon in the armory of a criminal lawyer, and therefore it has to be used very diligently. It has to be used very intelligently.
जाने के बाद अभी भी करेंगे क्या क्या हम उनका एक
Examination. Cross-examination is a performance mistakes. Unnecessary cross-examination digs the grave of many a cases, and therefore the performance of cross-examination has to be proper. Now, I will give you an example which has actually happened in the courts in Pune. There was a defense lawyer who was cross-examining an eyewitness. The case of the prosecution was that this eyewitness was going on a bicycle. The incident had occurred in the night between 9 to 9:15 p.m. The eyewitness was going on the bicycle, and when he reached near the chowk, on the opposite side of the road, he saw A stabbing B. And therefore, he turned his bicycle, went away, and lodged the report to the police station. Now, when he was being cross-examined by the defense counsel asked him a question. Of course, in the scene of offense Panchanama, there was no mention of any light, source of light, electricity pole or tube light near about the place of the incident. That was there in the spot Panchanama. Therefore, the defense counsel need not have asked, but he asked the question. And why not? I mean, if he's getting an admission, he asked the question to the witness that, look here, there was no source of electricity, tube light or pole there near about the spot of the witness. The witness was a truthful witness, and he admitted, yes, there was no source of light there like tube light or electricity pole, etc. Now here, the cross-examiner had got a very good admission. It was 9:15 in the night. There was no electric pole or source of electricity there at the spot of the incident. He should have stopped there, and at the time of cross-examination, he could have argued that, sir, there was no source of electricity, no pole, and therefore the witness could not have seen the accused. That witness had identified the accused in the in the identification parade, which was held in the jail, and there he had identified him because he was unknown. The accused was unknown to the witness. Now, here he should have waited, but he was tempted and he asked a further question to the witness that since there was no source of electricity there, you could not see the face of the assailant. Now, the moment he asked this question, the witness answered that no, there was a four-wheeler coming from the opposite direction, and the focus of the light of the four-wheeler was on the face of the assailant, and therefore I identified. So what happened? The admission that he had got earlier got totally diminished, and the case ended in a conviction. So friends, you should know where to stop during cross-examination. Now, he could have easily argued at the time of the arguments that there was no source of electricity, and he saw from a distance, and therefore it was not possible for him to see the face and the features of the accused, and he would have been disbelieved in the court. So, what you ask in cross-examination is very important. Where to stop is the most important. In fact, the best cross-examiner is the person who knows what not to ask. You can ask so many things, but everybody does not know what not to ask. And therefore, you have to stop when you get a crucial admission. So also, you can strategize in the manner that if there are more than one eyewitnesses and you have taken instructions from your clients, you know which eyewitness is intelligent, who is not intelligent, who knows what, who doesn't know. If you get a particular admission from the first witness, then it is not necessary to ask the same question to the other witness, because that witness may be alert. The prosecutor might make him alert and tell him what to answer. He can give a contradictory answer, or he can give an explanation to the answer given by the earlier witness and damage your case. Therefore, if you get a crucial admission from the first witness, eyewitness, you need not ask the same question to the second eyewitness. So you have to strategize accordingly while asking questions to different eyewitnesses on the same point. So therefore, friends, cross-examination is the most important thing, and you cannot be casual while asking questions during cross-examination. And the cross-examination should always in line with your defense, in line with whatever defense that you take. Now, I told you that the first defense that we normally take is that of total denial. But in a criminal trial, along with an defense of total denial, you can take alternative defense. Now, this alternative defense can only be taken in a criminal trial. There are so many alternative defenses available. Now, why can you take alternative defense? Because in a criminal trial, the accused is not bound by his pleadings, unlike in a civil case. In a civil case, the parties are bound by their pleadings. But in the criminal trial, accused is not bound by his pleading. For example, if during bail application, you have taken a particular defense, maybe you have taken a defense of alibi during bail application. It is not necessary that you have to take the same defense during trial. And therefore, you are not bound by pleading. It is for the prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. there is no burden upon you. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. And therefore, and since the accused is not bound by pleadings, he can take alternative defenses. Not only that, but you can also change the defense during the course of the trial. So if you give a particular suggestion to the first witness, and if during the cross-examination of the second witnesses, you develop the case, get some more admissions, you can change the suggestion while cross-examining the second witness. You can change the defense as the trial proceeds. And therefore, that can also be available to you in a criminal trial. And therefore, alternate defense can also be taken. Now, what are these alternate defense? So many alternate defenses can be taken. Now, these defenses which I am telling you can be directly taken as well as taken as alternate defense. They are right of private defense in respect of one's body and property. Grave and sudden provocation. Intention not to commit murder. That is one of the exceptions to the general principles. Then, so many alternate defenses can be taken in a criminal alibi. So many alternate defense, and these defenses can be taken positively or directly as well. Now, the best case of alternate defense is in respect of a rape case. In a rape case, obviously, your defense is that of total denial. You deny that the accused has committed rape on the victim or that he has committed sexual intercourse without her consent. You obviously deny. It's a defense of denial. But at the same time, during the cross-examination, in most of the cases, you develop the theory of consent. You develop the theory of consent during cross-examination. Now, you know about the famous Varatharajan case. That in that case, the Supreme Court had said, although the girl was not a major, she was below 18, but the Supreme Court had said that if she knows what is good and bad for her, if she is major and capable of taking decisions, then she would be a consenting party. Now, there are a number of cases. Nowadays, there are love affairs between a boy and girl. Both are major, more than 18. And they go at various places. They nowadays there is no taboo so far as sexual relations is concerned. They may have sex also, and the boy promises to marry the girl, but eventually does not marry, and therefore she files a complaint of sexual intercourse, rape. Sometimes the boy elopes with the girl is found by the parents, and thereafter the parents do not leave her, and she also, under the pressure of the parents, file a case of complaint. In these type of cases, you can always develop the case of consent while cross-examining the witness. Sometimes during instructions, as I've told you, instructions are very important. You have to take proper and thorough instructions from the client. So while instructions, you come across some photographs between the boy and the girl. There are some messages sent through SMSs or through WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. So if certain material is with you, you bring those material on record during cross-examination, or on the basis of certain instructions. When the boy tells that we had gone at such a place, we had stayed there, she only paid the bill, she took me to such a place, so on and so forth. You can develop all that in cross-examination due to the instructions given to you by your client. And therefore, this is nothing but an alternate defense that you develop in cross-examination. Now, in case of alternate defense, the accused may take an alternate defense, or the court may gather it from attending circumstances. So you may not take an alternate defense at all. But even if you don't take an alternate defense, the court can gather it from the attending circumstances on record. right? Like in a case of rape or in a case of right of private defense, the court gathers from the circumstances that this defense may be available to the accused and gives him the benefit of that defense. As I was telling you, in rape cases nowadays, there are cases where living the boy and girl, or the man and woman live together without marriage. Live-in relationships are there, and therefore, but somehow because of some financial problems between the two or some difference of opinion, they don't stay together, and it can go to the extent of lodging a complaint of rape, etc. And therefore, during such cases, you develop the theory of consent, which is a alternate defense. Now, the next defense, that now what are the stages during which the defense is taken by the accused? Now, this defense is taken in 4 stages, according to me. 1, during cross-examination. You take a particular defense, you develop it in cross-examination. Therefore, at that time, you take that defense. Then when you give the suggestion to the witness during the end of the cross-examination, you put suggestions that this is my case. This is the case of the accused. During that time, you take a defense. Then at the time of the statement under section 330, when the accused is incriminating circumstances are put to the accused by the judge, and he gives some explanation. At that time, he can give the explanation and he can take a defense. Or when the accused examines witnesses in his defense, at that time, he can take up the defense. These are various stages during which the defense is taken by the accused. Now, we saw the defense of total denial. We saw the alternate defense of consent in a rape case. Now, we'll go through some more defenses. The next defense that can be taken during trial is right of private defense. Now, right of private defense with regard to one's body or property can be directly positively taken by the accused, or can be taken as an alternative defense, or can be considered by the court on the basis of the available circumstances on record. It can be gathered by the court from the available circumstances on record. Of course, when you take the defense of right of private defense, there should be circumstances on record which enable you to take that defense. You cannot just take it for the sake of taking without there being any evidence on the record, without there being any substance in the charge sheet in that respect. So, merely bare words are not sufficient. There should be some circumstances on the record. Now, for example, if there are injuries on the person of the accused, then this defense can be very well taken, right of private defense. Or if there are counter cases, if there are counter cases, as many of you may be knowing, for the same incident, both sides lodge a complaint. The complainant party also lodges a complaint, and the accused also lodge a complaint for the same incident. These are called counter cases. Both sides lodge complaint. Both the session cases, even if one case is a session case and the other case is triable by the magistrate has to commit it to the court of session. And one and the same judge tries both the cases, and the judgment is also delivered by the same judge at the same time in respect of these counter cases, where there are counter complaints in respect of the same incident. So, if such things are on record, or if there is some dispute on the property and there is some fight in respect of the property, where the property belongs to the accused, then also this evidence can be taken. Or if a thief enters the house of the accused, and the accused is in imminent danger, or if there is threat to his life, then he can act in his right of private defense, and that act can extend to cause bodily injury to that person, thief, who has entered It can also extend to the causing of death if there is imminent danger of death to the accused. And therefore, when such circumstances are on record, the right of private defense can very well be taken by the accused. In fact, it is a very good defense when such circumstances are there on record. Now, when remember I told you that the burden of proving the case is on the prosecution. The burden never shifts. But when an accused takes a particular plea, like right of private defense, or alibi, or grave and sudden provocation, then the onus to prove this plea is on the accused. The onus to prove this circumstance that he had the right of private defense will be on the accused. But the burden to prove the entire case will still be on the prosecution. But when the accused takes up a plea of right of private defense, then to prove that there existed a right and that he had the right of private defense available, that burden would shift on the accused only to that extent when he takes a particular plea. Now, I have already told you that this right of private defense can be directly taken or can be taken as an alternative defense. The accused, there should be, of course, some corroboration, direct or indirect corroboration, and the court, if there are counter cases, the court sees who is the aggressor, who has started the incident, who has really started the incident, that the court sees if it is a counter case. Now I will give you an example. I was conducting a session trial in the Sessions Court at Baramati. There were counter cases in respect of the same incident. The case which I was defending was a murder case. My accused were charged for murder, and in the case where one of the accused was the complainant, that was under section 326 of the IPC. But being counter cases, both were heard by the same judge, one after the other. Now the prosecution story was that the agricultural field of the complainant party and the agricultural field of the accused was next to each other. According to the prosecution story, the accused did not have access to their agricultural land, and they were trespassing the property of the prosecution. That was the prosecution case. However, there were civil dispute pending in respect of the one road, approach road, which was a cart road, and the civil court, the prosecution complainant party said believed that road belonged to them, that was within their property. According to the accused, it was a common road, Samahik Rasta, and civil suit was pending. The civil court had given injunction to the accused to go by that cart road only for the purpose of doing work in the agricultural field. But before going, they had to intimate to the concerned police station about it. Now, the prosecution case was that on the day of the incident, the accused were going by a tractor from that cart road. The prosecution witnesses, the complainant, the deceased, and the other witnesses were working in their agricultural field. The accused came in the tractor. They were having other workers also who had come for cutting the sugarcane. While going there, the accused stopped their tractor, started abusing the complainant party. There was a verbal exchange between them, and suddenly the accused got down from the tractor. They were carrying weapons. They started assaulting the complainant party. One of the persons died. The others received injuries on their person. Therefore, the the complainant had accordingly lodged a complaint to the police station. Now, therefore, the matter
It's
came up
5
for
o'clock.
trial. Matter came up for trial. Now, the defense that I took was that of right of private defense. We had got an order from the civil court. There was an order in our favor that we could go by that cart road. Accordingly, the accused had given an intimation to the police station and they were going to cut sugarcane in their field at the relevant time. That was the defense. For that, they were also accompanied by some workers who were sitting at the backside of the tractor in that trolley, and they were carrying those some weapons. There are particular weapons in this Baramati Solapur side which are used for cutting the sugarcane crop. It is like Sattur. Those weapons the workers were carrying. That was our defense. That some workers were also there and we are going to cut sugarcane field. And while we were so going, the complainant party were the aggrieved party because they never liked us going by that road to our field. Therefore, they were angry and they suddenly stopped our tractor, started giving her abuses, pulled two accused from the tractor and downstairs and started assaulting the accused with the weapons in their hand like axe, etc., sticks and axes. And because they started, since they were the aggressors, we started protecting ourselves. We started defending ourselves. Not only did we defend ourselves, but those workers we were carrying for cutting the sugarcane crop, they also came to our rescue and they also helped us. And while they were protecting us, the complainant party and the disease might have received the injuries. That was our defense. Now here, there were circumstances on record because the accused were having injuries on their person. There were counter cases. Therefore, presence of the accused had to be taken by me. I could not have said that, no, we were not present there. Total denial. Court might not have believed that. And therefore, looking to the circumstances available on record, the best available defense for me was right of private defense. And therefore, I took that defense of right of private defense. And because the civil court order was in my favor, naturally, who would be aggrieved? The complainant party. When we were going, who would be angry? The complainant party. And therefore, I could argue before the court that they were aggrieved. They were the aggressors. They started the incident. And that is why I had to defend myself. That is how we defended. And we acted in the right of our private defense. We had the right of private defense was available to us. And we availed of that right of private defense. And this defense was believed by the court and all the accused were acquitted. Therefore, when there are circumstances on record, we can take such type of defense. And therefore, this is in respect of right of private defense. Now, of course, when I told you that when the accused takes the right of private defense, he has to prove that that the defense was available to him from the circumstances on record. Of course, the onus shifts on the accused, but this onus or this burden is not that not as the burden on the prosecution is. The prosecution has to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt, but the burden on the accused is that of probability, preponderance of probability, as is available in a civil case. In a civil case, mere preponderance of probability is sufficient. But in a criminal case, a higher degree of assurance is required. But when an accused takes a plea of right of private defense, etc., then when he has to prove that defense, the defense is like that in a civil case, that of preponderance of probability. And that defense is not as strict as the defense, as the as the prosecution has to prove his case beyond reasonable doubt. So the defense is merely of preponderance of probability, and therefore all that the accused has to show is that the defense taken by him is probable. There are two stories coming before the court. One was the story led by the prosecution. One was the story taken by the defense, that of right of private defense. And if the accused is in a position to show that the defense is probable, that is sufficient for the court to hold that the right of private defense is proved by the defense. Sometimes, even if the accused is not in a position to prove his right of private defense, and even then the accused can be acquitted, because if the prosecution is not in a position to prove their case,
No voice, sir.
Sir,
We
unmute
can't hear you,
please.
sir. Sir, we can't hear you, sir.
the prosecution suffers and the accused are given the benefit of doubt and they can be acquitted even if their defense is found to be false. Therefore, prosecution has to stand firmly on its leg. As they say, prosecution stands on its own strength or false. And therefore, the burden is on the prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. Now, another defense that can be taken is that of alibi. Alibi means the accused is not present at the spot at the time of the incident and is at some other place, somewhere else. But here, again, the burden is on the accused to show that he is not actually present at the spot where the incident occurs. Accused has to show that he cannot be present at the spot physically, and therefore that burden lies on him to prove that he is not present at the spot of the incident. In the case where the defense is of alibi, the documents are very important. If there are contemporaneous documents which have come into existence at that time, then it helps. For example, if the accused is in prison at that time, then there is documentary evidence to that effect. Or if he is admitted in a hospital, then there is documentary evidence to show that he is in the hospital. Or if he is doing some official work at that time or government work at that time, then documentary evidence can come to his rescue and he can take the evidence of alibi. But of course, as I told you, that burden to prove alibi is on the accused, but that burden is of preponderance of probability. Now here again, I would give you one example. Nowadays, there is CCTV available at various places. So from CCTV, all footage also, you can very well show to the court that you were at some other place and not at the place of the incident. Now, I had conducted a very famous case at Solapur way back in the 90s. One Ravi Patil is a very famous person from Solapur. He was an MLA for a number of terms. He used to be the MLA from a place called Indi, which is at 1 hour distance from Solapur, about 60 kilometers. But it comes in state of Karnataka. It is at the border. Now, there were two gangs in Solapur at that time. One gang was of Ravi Patil and the other was a Kodekar gang. And this case was in respect of murder of Ganesh Kodekar. Very famous case. Now, Ravi Patil's elder brother Ramesh Patil and other 7 persons were accused in that case. The prosecution case was that at around 1 or 1:15 p.m. in the afternoon, this Ganesh Kolekar and his friends were sitting on the ota, katta of the at the side of the road, and were chit-chatting. At that time, two accused came on the motorcycle. Accused number one, Ramesh Patil, was the pillion rider of the motorcycle. This motorcycle was followed by a Maruti van. The motorcycle stopped for a second near to this katta where this is Ganesh Kolekar was sitting at the corner of the katta, and the pillion rider shot at Ganesh Kolekar from his revolver, and Ganesh Kolekar collapsed at the place. The motorcycle immediately fled. The Maruti van, which was following the motorcycle, stopped in the chowk. They had weapons like hockey stick and swords, etc. They ransacked a hotel which belonged to this rival party, ransacked the hotel and left from the place. There were eyewitnesses to the incident who were sitting on the katta along with Ganesh Kolekar, and the case was put up for trial. Now there were 4 to 5 eyewitnesses examined by the prosecution in this case. In the case, there was other evidence like discovery evidence of weapons, bloodstained clothes, etc., etc. Now all these eyewitnesses were cross-examined by us. There were 2-3 defense counsel. All the eyewitnesses were cross-examined on various points, conduct, etc., medical evidence, so on and so forth. And but 3 of the accused had set up the defense of alibi. They had taken the plea of alibi. Alibi of one of the accused was that on the relevant day, he was at Pune. He had come to the office of Food Corporation of India. There was entry in the register, and he had also signed documents on that day there in the office of Food Corporation of India. The second accused had taken alibi that he was at Hyderabad at the relevant time. He had stayed in a hotel at Hyderabad for 2 days. We actually went to Hyderabad, saw that hotel register, ascertained for ourselves that he had stayed there. During the stay at Hyderabad, he had also visited a hospital, a clinic, a doctor, because of some food poisoning, etc. And there was prescription of the doctor available with him, which had been produced by us. We examined the manager of the hotel as a defense witness. This was the alibi of the second accused. The third accused, that is Ramesh Patil, the principal accused, had taken an alibi that on the day of the incident, he was at Indi, which is a taluka place, and he was present in the court in the afternoon, and he gave bail before the JMFC court Indi at 3 o'clock. At that time, the recess used to be from 2:30 to 3. So at 3 o'clock, he had given bail in the court, in the court at Indi, in respect of a pending case where warrant was issued against him, in respect of a case under 324. And we had examined the clerk of the court as defense witness, and had also examined the police prosecutor who had given the say to his bail application. And therefore such witnesses were examined by us. However, the learned judge, I remember Rane was the additional session judge at Solapur at the relevant time. The learned judge discarded the evidence of alibi. All the 3 alibi was evidence of alibi was discarded by him. Even in respect of Ramesh Patil, that he had given bail in the court. In that respect, the learned judge has held in the judgment that the incident had occurred in between 1 and 1:15 p.m. So after the incident, he could have gone to Indi and given bail in the court, the papers might have been prepared by the his advocate and by the surety, etc., before he went, and he might have given bail at 3 o'clock in the court. And therefore, the alibi was not taken into consideration by the learned judge, and therefore it was disbelieved. But even though this plea taken by the accused was not proved, held not proved by the accused and was disbelieved by the court, all the accused were acquitted, because the learned judge held that the prosecution has not proved its case beyond reasonable doubt. Although the alibi is false, but the eyewitnesses were also planted and false. We had cross-examined the eyewitnesses. Therefore, I told you cross-examination is very important. We had cross-examined the eyewitness on the point of conduct. The eyewitnesses are not, although they were close friends of the deceased, they did not go and report the matter to the police immediately. The statements were recorded after 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. There was delay in disclosing about the incident to the police. There were omissions and contradictions in their evidence. All those had been brought by us in cross-examination. There were contradictions inter se between the witnesses. There was discrepancy between the eyewitness account and the medical evidence, because of course there also we had to cross-examine the doctor and bring certain things on in cross-examination. There was discrepancy to the extent that the eyewitnesses had said that the motorcycle stopped near the deceased and Ramesh Patil fired from close range. However, we brought from the cross-examination of the doctor that this injury could not be possible from a close proximity, and the bullet had to be fired from a distance. The doctor had admitted that, and therefore there was variance between the medical evidence and the ocular evidence. So also the direction of the injury was different according to the medical science from the story of the eyewitnesses, and therefore these contradictions we had to bring on record through cross-examination of the expert, the doctor who had performed the post-mortem on the disease. And therefore, there was no injury on any of the other witnesses who were also inimical to the accused. Why would have they left them alone, etc. And there were so many other points on which we could argue and impress upon the judge that the eyewitnesses are actually lying. They were not there at the spot at the time of the incident. They were inimical witnesses. They were got up witnesses, and they were deposing falsely against the accused. And the learned judge therefore disbelieved the evidence of eyewitnesses and other witnesses, punch witnesses, etc., and acquitted all the accused. Although the alibi that was taken by the accused was proved to be false. Therefore, the burden of proving the case entirely rests on the prosecution. Burden never shifts. The onus may shift when an accused takes up a particular plea, only in respect of proving that plea. Here there was plea of alibi. That has to be proved by the accused, and the main burden remains on the prosecution. So this is a very classic case where it can be seen that burden never shifts from the prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. So also, another defense that can be taken at a trial is that of insanity. Now, in case of insanity, the burden is on the accused to show that at the time of the incident, he was insane, or at the time of the incident, he was not of, at the time of the incident, he was of sound mind. That has to be taken, that has to be proved by the accused. The burden shifts on the accused. In this case, medical evidence is of utmost importance, because the court considers his state of mind at the time of the incident, before the incident, and after the incident. That is considered by the court. Therefore, here, if there is any documentary evidence to show that the accused is having treatment of insanity or unsoundness of mind, then that would come handy, and the accused can be in a position to prove it by examining the doctor or by uh, getting the documents exhibited, so on and so forth. So the medical evidence becomes of prime importance in case of defense of insanity. Now, there is a disease called schizophrenia. In cases of schizophrenia, an accused may be normal at a given point of time, but after some time, he may start behaving irrational or do certain things which he doesn't understand what he is doing at the relevant time. And that happens in disease of uh, schizophrenia. Now, I had conducted a case at Satara. It was a case of murder. The prosecutor, where I had taken this defense of insanity. The case of the prosecution was that on the day of the incident, the disease was sitting on the ota of the mandir in the village. It is a case from a village. He was sitting, and the accused suddenly came out running from his house along with an axe. He ran in that lane to and fro, suddenly went near the disease who was sitting on the ota of the mandir and gave him a solid blow on his head and started running in the village saying, "Look here, I have killed the disease. I have killed the disease. He deserved that, and therefore I have killed the disease." And later on, the charge sheet came to be filed, and the case was put up for trial in the Sessions Court at Satara. Now, the defense that we had taken was that of total denial. The witnesses were examined, they were cross-examined, the charge was framed. At the time of framing of charge, the accused denied the charge. He said that he claimed to be tried, he did not admit the charge. Thereafter, the witnesses were examined, they were cross-examined, the prosecution evidence was over. Later on, the accused was called upon by the judge to give his statement under section 313. The incriminating evidence was put to him, and at the time of 313 statement, suddenly he started saying, "सांगितलं ना, 100 वेळा सांगितलं ना, मीच मारले म्हणून." He told the court that he has only assaulted the disease, he has committed the murder, and I am telling you 100 times that I have committed the murder. That is what he said during the statement under 313. Now, suddenly he said that we argued the case, and the judge convicted him and gave him death sentence. He was sentenced to death. Now, the 1 year before the incident, he had taken some Ayurvedic medicines for unsoundness of mind. But he had never given these instructions to us at that time. Therefore, we had not taken this defense of unsoundness of mind or insanity. The learned judge gave death penalty to the accused. Now we went in appeal in the High Court, and the matter was also sent, because in case of death penalty, the High Court has to, the death sentence has to be confirmed by the High Court. So the confirmation matter went there, and we also filed appeal to the High Court. While arguing in the High Court, we told the judge that, my lords, look here, that he was a person who was suffering from schizophrenia. He had taken some treatment, Ayurvedic treatment, 1 year prior to the incident, and during the statement under 313, he suddenly told the judge that 100 times I am telling you that I have committed the murder. And the manner in which the incident took place, he went shouting in the village that I have murdered. All that shows that he was not of sound mind when he has committed the incident, because the relevant state of mind at the time of commission of the offense is important. And therefore, we argued that at that time he was of unsound mind, and only therefore he has committed such an act. And therefore, he may be given the benefit of doubt, and the defense of insanity may be, now we may be allowed to take that defense in appeal, and he may be acquitted. Now the High Court directed the stopped there and asked us that what we will do is, it was a division bench, we'll remand the matter back to the Sessions Court. And therefore High Court remanded the matter back to the Sessions Court and directed the Sessions Court to record statement under 313 afresh and hear arguments of both the sides. So the matter went back before the Sessions Judge, and the statements under section 313 were recorded, arguments took place. After that, the judge had changed by that time. The judge still convicted him, but the sentence was that of life imprisonment. So from death it was converted to imprisonment for life. We again went in appeal before the Bombay High Court, and at the time of arguments, I was arguing that, my lords, the right of defense of insanity is being taken by me, and he was not of unsound mind for various reasons, the manner in which he committed the offense, etc. And during statement under 313, he has admitted, said that he has murdered, etc., etc. And at the time of arguments, while going through the entire paper book and arguments, the division bench suddenly stopped and said that, counsel, forget about unsoundness of mind, forget about the defense of insanity, but what we will do is that, according to us, the intention of the accused was not to commit murder, and therefore we reduce the sentence from imprisonment of life. We hold him guilty under 304 and not under 302, and we convict him for 7 years. And accordingly, the Bombay High Court reduced the sentence, convicted him for 7 years under 304. He had already, he was under trial prisoner for 6 years. He was sentenced and he was there in the prison for 6 years. He came out within 1 year. So anything can happen in a criminal trial. You have to do your best. After all, it is the luck of the client, and therefore you have to prepare the brief properly and conduct the case accordingly. And therefore, suddenly from the defense of insanity, it got converted into one of the exceptions, that intention was not to commit murder. And the High Court, after considering the circumstances of record, gathered it from the circumstances on record and reduced the conviction from life imprisonment to imprisonment for 7 years. Therefore, all these things can happen. Then there is one more defense, that is grave and sudden provocation. This is also an important defense. But remember, it should be both grave and sudden. There should be provocation A, and secondly, the provocation should be both grave as well as sudden. If it is merely grave, it would be of no use. And if it is merely sudden, it is of no use. It should be both grave as well as sudden provocation. And then you must be knowing about that famous case of Nanavati case, that naval officer's case, in which the Supreme Court held that the provocation is grave, but it is not sudden. If there is a time lapse, then time lapse or time gap between the provocation and the incident, then that defense is not available to you. For example, if an accused comes to his house and sees his wife having intimate relationship with the deceased, then naturally there is provocation, a grave provocation. If they are found in compounding possession in the house, then that is, the provocation is grave. But if in case he immediately assaults the deceased and kills him, then it may be grave and sudden provocation, depending on the facts and circumstances of the case, of course. But if after 6 hours, he goes, follows the deceased and kills him. Then, although the provocation may be grave, it is not sudden. And therefore, if he takes a defense of grave and sudden provocation at the trial, that defense may not be available to him. The court may not believe that defense, and he may be convicted. And that is exactly in Nanavati's case as well. And therefore, the provocation must be both grave as well as sudden. The one more defense that is available is that of drunkenness. Now, if accused is in a state of drunkenness, if he doesn't understand what he's doing, if he's drunk to such an extent, and if he's not in a position to know what he's doing, that evidence, that defense may be available to him. But look, remember that drunkenness should be involuntary. It cannot be voluntary. If you voluntarily consume alcohol and then say, yes, I was drunk to such an extent that I did not know what I was doing, no, that defense is not available. But if the drunkenness is involuntary, if you are forced to consume alcohol, or by fraud, if alcohol is given to you, and then if you commit some offense, then that defense of drunkenness is available to you, provided, of course, it is involuntary. If voluntarily you drink, that is not a defense that is available to you. So these are various defenses that can be taken during a criminal trial. But always remember that when you take a particular defense, the circumstances should be there in the prosecution story. Only then you can take that defense, and you should cross-examine the witness accordingly. Therefore, if you are able to cross-examine the witness and bring circumstances on record, then only you can be successful in taking the defense. And therefore, defense, the cross-examination should always be in line with the prosecution story. Remember, Earl Jowett, who was former Lord Chancellor of England, he had said that it is the duty of the counsel for the defense to endeavor by every legitimate means to secure his client's acquittal. And therefore, to seek your client's acquittal, you can do anything but by legitimate means. The endeavor should be to secure his acquittal by legitimate means. That is not so in case of a prosecutor. A prosecutor should not try to seek conviction by any means whatsoever. Prosecution should be a public prosecutor, while conducting the case, should be fair to the accused, fair to the person who is dead or to the complainant, fair to the judge, and fair to the opposition. The accused also has to be fair. The defense also has to be fair. But the defense is given liberty to try to seek acquittal of the client by any, of course, by legitimate means. And the ultimate aim is to secure acquittal. Because, as you know, our criminal jurisprudence says that even if 100 criminals escape, but no innocent should be punished. That is the cardinal principle in respect of criminal trial. And therefore, it is a duty of the defense lawyer to try and seek the acquittal of your client by legitimate means. And therefore, it is your duty to try and protect your client as much as possible by taking proper defense, by cross-examining the witness after taking proper instructions and studying the case in detail. And medical evidence is very important in any criminal trial. You have to know a bit of medical evidence as well, because the doctor, if you get good admissions from the doctor, it can turn the case topsy-turvy. Because if there is, as they say, men may lie, but circumstances do not lie. Sometimes men may lie, circumstances tend to lie, but the medical evidence does not. Medical science does not lie, and therefore, sometimes if you bring variance between the medical evidence and the ocular evidence by properly cross-examining the doctor and bringing material on record, then you may succeed in the case. And therefore, medical evidence is also of utmost importance in the criminal trial. And therefore, friends, this is all that I wanted to share with you this evening. I thank all of you for listening me patiently.
Thank you very much, Nimbalkar sir. There must be a few questions as usual. So if anybody is interested in asking questions, he may ask the questions. A few of them have sent messages to me. I'll ask those questions also. In the meantime, I'll ask if anybody कोणाला काही प्रश्न जर विचारायचे असतील तर प्लीज प्रश्न विचारा. So there is this one question from Advocate Bhate, and sir, her question is,
Yes.
I'll just read it out. So there are two questions basically. Care to be taken while cross-examination of a victim child in a POXO case, as in such cases the burden of proving his innocence is on the accused. So what would be your comment on this?
Yes. In POXO case, there are so many restrictions that have been put for the defense. And while cross-examining the witness, you have to see that you don't pressurize him in any manner, or you don't put him in fear of anything. And therefore, while cross-examining the witness in a POXO case, you have to take more care than normal. Of course, that does not mean that you should not try and seek admissions from him, but then you have to let him know what you are asking. It should not happen that he does not understand the question which has been put by you. You should explain to him and then ask question and take admission. You cannot, as they say, try to hide certain things from him and then take admission. That care has to be taken.
Yes, yes, sir. अभिजित, तुला काय प्रश्न विचारायचा आहे का?
हो. सर प्रश्न असा आहे की सेक्शन 43 आणि 44 IPC ज्या वेळेला असं म्हणतं की तो एक्सप्रेशन आहे इलिगली कॉज्ड असा शब्द आहे त्याच्यामध्ये, तर एनी इंजुरी वाउंड किंवा व्हॉट एव्हर मे बी, तर त्यामध्ये या इलिगली कॉजचं बर्डन प्रॉसिक्युशनवर आहे इथपर्यंत ठीक आहे. व्हॉट विल बी द डिफेन्सेस फॉर एनी डिफेन्स काउन्सिल ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ वेदर इट इज कॉज्ड लिगली. म्हणजे त्याचं उदाहरण असं आहे, सर्जन एखादी सर्जरी करत असेल तर त्याचं इंटेन्शन काही इल मोटिव्ह नाहीये, त्याच्यामध्ये इंटेन्शन टू किल नसणार आहे किंवा इंजुरी करण्याचं नसणार आहे. तर वेदर दॅट इंजुरी कॅन बी ट्रीटेड ऍज अ लिगली कॉज्ड, बट अनफॉर्च्युनेटली इट इज टर्न इन टू अ फॅटल ऑर अदरवाईज, मग त्या इलिगली कॉज एक्सप्रेशनचं काय करायचं?
बरोबर आहे. आता तुम्ही म्हटलं ते बरोबर आहे. सर्जन हा सर्जरी करत असताना त्याचं इंटेन्शन कधीच त्याला इंजुरी कॉज करण्याचं नसतं किंवा डेथ होण्याचं नसतं. तो त्याचं काम करत असतो. तर त्यावेळेला सर्जनला फक्त एवढं दाखवून द्यायला पाहिजे की तो जे सर्जरी करत असताना ज्या गोष्टी त्यांच्या मेडिकल सायन्स प्रमाणे करायच्या असतात त्याच तो करत होता. एवढंच त्या सर्जनला दाखवता यायला पाहिजे की तो व्यवस्थित काळजीपूर्वक ज्या मेडिकल सायन्सला ज्या गोष्टी कराव्या लागतात मेडिकल सायन्समध्ये, त्याच गोष्टी करत होता, प्रॉपरली सर्जरी करत होता, हे त्याला दाखवून द्यायला पाहिजे. आणि असं करत असताना जर चुकून काही इंजुरी झाली किंवा डेथ झाली तर ही इज नॉट गिल्टी फॉर द said offense.
Sir, there is one more question from Advocate Akshay Naik. And sir, his
Yes.
question is, what is a can you explain the difference between contradiction, omission, and a suggestion? In short, that is his question.
आता ओमिशन, कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन अँड सजेशन या तिन्ही वेगवेगळ्या गोष्टी आहेत. इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ ओमिशन, ओमिशन कशाला म्हणतात की विटनेस पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये एखादी गोष्ट सांगतो आणि कोर्टामध्ये तो साक्ष देत असतो. तर कोर्टामध्ये साक्ष देत असताना पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये ती गोष्ट त्याने सांगितलेलीच नसेल, पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये ती ओमिशन असते, त्याला ओमिशन म्हणतात. म्हणजे जास्तीची गोष्ट तो कोर्टामध्ये सांगतो. तर त्यामुळे इट इज नॉट देअर इन हिज अर्लियर स्टेटमेंट बिफोर द पोलीस, देअरफॉर इट अमाउंट्स टू अन ओमिशन विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू हिज अर्लियर स्टेटमेंट. कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्शनच्या बाबतीमध्ये कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्शन म्हणजे पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये तो एक गोष्ट सांगतो आणि कोर्टामध्ये कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्टरी गोष्ट सांगतो. फॉर एक्झाम्पल, आरोपी डिसीजला मारून जाताना तो उत्तरेकडे पळाला असं ते पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये सांगत असेल आणि कोर्टात साक्ष देत असताना सांगतो की आरोपी ने मारलं आणि तो दक्षिणेकडे पळाला. हे कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्टरी, कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्टरी गोष्टी तो सांगतो, तर त्याला कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्शन म्हणतात. ती कॉन्ट्रॅडिक्शन क्रॉस एक्झामिनेशन मध्ये तुम्हाला आणावी लागते. त्याला विटनेसला आधी विचारायला लागतं की बाबा रे, तू असं आता कोर्टापुढे सांगतो तसं तू पोलिसांच्या पुढे सांगितलं होतं का? नाही. मग पोलिसांपुढे असं सांगितलं होतं का? आणि ते इट हॅज टू बी ब्रॉट ऑन रेकॉर्ड. अँड इफ ही ऍडमिट्स, मग ती प्रूव्ह करायची गरज नाही. त्यांनी जर ती ऍडमिट नाही केली कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन, तर ती आयोगकडनं प्रूव्ह करायला लागते की पोलीस स्टेटमेंटमध्ये तुमच्या पुढे त्याने असं सांगितलं होतं ना, कारण कोर्टात त्याने विरुद्ध काहीतरी सांगितलं असतं. ती कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन होती. त्यामुळे एव्हरी ओमिशन कॅनॉट बी अ कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन, बट एव्हरी कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन बिकम्स अन ओमिशन. असं ओमिशन आणि कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन. आणि सजेशन म्हणजे क्रॉस एक्झामिनेशनच्या वेळेला जेव्हा तुम्ही सजेशन देता, तुमची केस पुटअप करता, किंवा तुम्ही विटनेस समजा सांगितलं असेल की मी त्याला अने बला चाकूने मारताना मी पाहिलं, तुम्ही क्रॉसमध्ये सजेशन देता की तू जे सांगितलंस एक्झामिनेशन इन चीफ मध्ये की अने बला चाकू मारताना मी पाहिलं, ते तू खोटं सांगतोयस, ते डिनायल असतं. पण सजेशन देताना तू तुझी समजा स्टोरी पुटअप केली की त्या घटनेच्या वेळेला मी तिथे नव्हतोच, मी घटना पुण्याला घडली पण मी त्यावेळी मुंबईला हायकोर्टामध्ये माझी दुसरी एक केस माझ्या विरुद्ध असलेली केस होती म्हणून मी तिकडे गेलो होतो, असं तू सजेशन पुटअप करतो. ते क्रॉसच्या वेळी तू वेगवेगळे सजेशन आपण पुटअप करू शकतो. त्यामुळे ओमिशन इज डिफरंट, कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन इज डिफरंट अँड सजेशन.
Okay, sir. Thank you. So there is one more question. It is from Advocate Abhay. He is from Goa, and his question is: are there any specific defenses available in trap cases in anti-corruption offenses? Whether there are any specific defenses available in these trap cases?
There are defenses available in trap cases also. In trap cases also you can give the defense of denial. Denial can be there. Now you are actually trap takes place, and therefore there are defenses like if there is anthracene powder, or if there is no anthracene powder at the relevant time, or if there is some enmity, and because of enmity if you are falsely implicated. Therefore different defenses are available in trap cases as well.
Okay. So there is one more last question from Advocate Sandeep Nimbalkar Saundwadi. So
Yes.
according to him, what is the importance of actually inspection of a site? It's a site inspection
Yes,
in a
yes.
offense.
Yes, sir. I did not cover that. Yes, I forgot that. Actually, in so many cases, the case you can get the case converted in your favor because of visiting the spot of the incident. In murder cases especially, it is always better that you visit the spot and see for yourself in respect of the in respect of the spot of the incident. You always carry the spot panchanama along with you and try to find out whether the spot is really the same which has been mentioned in the spot panchanama or not. You yourself draw the map on the spot, which I normally do. And if you have actually seen the spot, then while cross-examining the witnesses, you are in a better position to put questions during cross-examination, because you are totally knowing the spot, and therefore while putting questions, you can twist questions according to the circumstances. Now, there was one case which I had conducted at Aurangabad, and in that case, the eyewitness had seen from the slit which the door was having, and therefore their case was that it was a big slit from which they could visualize the incident. But when I went and saw the incident, I saw that slit, and I could notice that it is difficult for the witness to see from that slit in normal course, and therefore I cross-examined the witness, but then I thought that it would be better if the judge also goes and visits the site and sees the site. So I gave an application, and the prosecution also was ready for the judge to visit the site of the spot. Accordingly, then the judge and the defense and the prosecution, we together went and saw the spot, and the judge was in my favor. He also thought that it is difficult for the witness to see from that slit, and we got the benefit and the accused got acquitted. Therefore, if we actually go and inspect the spot and see the spot of the incident, it normally helps in a criminal.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one more question in fact, and this question is whether contradiction and omission has to be confronted to a witness in a case of FIR. This is from Advocate Mihir Bande.
Yes, it is better, because earlier there was a judgment of the Nagpur bench that if the complainant need not be, the omission and contradiction need not be put to the complainant, because the FIR is an exhibited document and you can read the document. But then later the Supreme Court has given a judgment that because ultimately whether that amounts to an FIR or not, you never know, because at the time of argument you could convince to the court that that complaint is not an FIR and some telephonic information or some other information could be an FIR, and therefore it is always better that even the omissions and contradictions are asked to the complainant in cross-examination and brought on record, because it may take some time, but then it is essential, because the complaint may not be an FIR ultimately, and therefore and accordingly the Supreme Court has also given the judgment accordingly that omissions and contradictions should be put to the complainant also during cross-examination.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one last question.
Yes.
1 second. So there is this question: is whether it is good to take a defense,
Yes.
since the bail application at the time of bail application itself.
Now, see, many a times if there is alibi available to you, you take that defense during bail application, or there is no harm in taking defense at the time of bail application also. But if there is some defense available to you at that time, you may take defense. But normally considerations of bail are different. Considerations of bail are that you are not, that there is no prima facie case against you under that section A, and B, you are not going to tamper with the evidence, you are readily available for trial, you will not abscond, etc. Therefore, these are the main criteria in respect of bail, and therefore you may take defense at the time of bail, you may not take. But if it is available to you, you may take it at that time also.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, there are so many questions coming, but if we keep on answering all the questions, I don't think we'll finish this session at all. So
No,
I
it is
think
up to you. It is up to you. It is up to you.
we have given a fair chance to everybody and all the areas, different areas. lawyers from Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg, Goa, Kolhapur, and Bombay. They are
Acha.
the participants of this webinar.
Okay, how many
Initially,
participants are there? How many participants?
We started with 156. So we had at one point of time crossed 170 participants.
Okay.
So it is, we started with hardly 50-60 lawyers, and now
Yes.
we have reached a point where we are 170 160 lawyers.
Very
And
good.
as we proceed, I think more the numbers of lawyers will be added. Sir,
Yes.
first of all, I thank you very much for sparing your valuable time for us and giving us a wonderful lecture. Many of us, many certain different aspects you covered in your lecture.
Yes.
The concepts which are not clear to the juniors, we have very nicely cleared those concepts for all of us. And we are looking forward for your further lecture in the course, which we will definitely again request you to come back and deliver lecture on some different aspects, on different laws, on different points, sir. I thank you very much on behalf of all the lawyers from Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg, Kolhapur, and Goa. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Sangramji. Thank you. I am grateful, and it's a privilege. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
To all my friends on this group, we'll end on this note. The only thing is that I want to inform you that most probably on 7th or 8th, Honorable ex-High Court Judge Justice Tipse sir will be delivering, Abhay Tipse sir will be delivering a lecture to us on mostly the subject will be POCSO, and whatever new developments take place, and if there are any other lectures, I'll be posting on both the group. I thank you all for very patiently listening to this lecture. And on this note, I end this today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.